Hey everybody, my name is Brian and I am a home hobbyist. I do a lot of mechanical work around my house, including wood shop stuff, mechanical things, composites. I do all kinds of things. And I decided to make this video because so often I see 50,000 videos on YouTube from experienced mechanics doing things that are complicated. To me, I'm pretty smart when it comes to working with those things, but oftentimes I feel like that these people, they have so much experience that it's hard to gel with what they're saying, because they're talking in a technical way. They've done these procedures many times. So that's kind of a preamble to what I'm going to do in this video. So what I'm going to do is something that a lot of you can probably do as well that are handy. You probably see that I got a lot of hot rods here, and I've got shifter go-kart over there, and all kinds of stuff in the shop. So I do a lot of work in the shop. I feel like I'm pretty handy with tools, and I'm relatively competent when it comes to doing things like measuring and just all the things that you have to do in order to make things and to have skills basically with mechanical things. So here's the story. So I have a 125cc shifter cart with a 1999 CR125 motor. And something has gone wrong with this motor. I don't know exactly what it was. It was fine after my last race, but unfortunately I put it all back together on the cart, go to the racetrack, and something's wrong with the transmission. I really don't know exactly what it is, okay? So I did do service on this motor before I went to this last race, but it had nothing to do with the gearbox. I replaced the piston and ring. That was it, basically, and I couldn't get it to fire. Long story short is the go-kart motor would it started basically through twisting the tire while a gear is engaged. So I had engaged first or second gear, and there was no way that I was going to be able to twist that back wheel. It was locked up tight. So bottom line is something's wrong with the transmission, and I'm going to rebuild this motor. And why I think that you might find this video useful is because I have never completely rebuilt a dirt bike motor before, a two-stroke motor. So I've been learning a lot of things in the process of getting ready to do this build, basically through watching videos like these. There's lots of good ones out there. There's a couple of guys, I'll give you their names later, that have some really good videos. I'll probably put some links up there for you to kind of make it easier on you. And so I just wanted you to get a feel basically of what it's like to do this as a beginner. I'm mechanical, so I do have some advantages. I wouldn't recommend probably tearing apart any motor if you have no skills for this type of thing whatsoever. But I just think it's unnerving sometimes to do this thing as a beginner. So I'm going to take my time. I'm going to read all my manuals, watch all my YouTube videos, and hopefully this is going to be a success. But I thought that I might be able to share some experience basically of what it feels like to rebuild this two-stroke motor as basically a beginner. I'm mechanical, as I mentioned, but I have never done a two-stroke motor rebuild before, so hopefully it's not going to be messed up. I'm going to take my time, and hopefully I can help others who have never done it before feel the same things that I'm feeling and learn the same things that I'm having to learn, so that you can do it too as a first timer. All right, so let me get started. I'm going to show you some of the problems that I've got coming up, and then we'll start the teardown and the rebuild process. So I hope you guys find this video useful, and I hope that I don't screw it up. Alright guys, so let me show you where I am with this teardown so far. So I hope you won't mind, and I hope you are resourceful and you can figure out for yourself how to remove a clutch. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, the problem with this bike motor, was that something was not working correctly with the shifting mechanism. It was locking up the motor. Something was wrong, and so I thought the first place to look is to take apart the clutch. So you can find videos really easily on YouTube about how to take off a clutch, but I'll show you a couple things after I kind of show you what's going on with this. Now one thing, this is where I am with this. So this has a input shaft. Can you hear all that play? So that's weird to me. Something just doesn't seem right. I don't know, but we're going to find out when we split these cases later. So that's basically where I am with this right now. I've taken the clutch off, and I'll show you a couple things that you're going to need to know regarding the removal of the clutch. So this tool here is actually a tool made by Motion Pro, and it's intended to remove a stator, which I actually bought this tool with the intention of cleaning the stator off, but I was under time pressure for this last race, so I left it, and I thought I would service the stator after this recent race. So unfortunately I'm going to have to not only service the stator, I'm going to have to service the gearbox and the whole dang cases and internal low end, bottom end. So anyway, this is a tool. I actually used it for the purpose of holding the clutch. So the way it works is you take this clutch basket, and this is really, like I say, not the best tool for this. Let me pull this a little closer. Now I've reinstalled some of these components because I'm paranoid about losing them. So this device, basically, it spreads inside of this basket, and let me get this open a little bit. So it doesn't want to cooperate, but long story short is you take these pins on the back side here, see that? And those insert into this piece right here. So see that little slot? There's a better tool made for this that goes on the outside right here and clamps using like a vice grip type body, and it's made by a company called Tusk. I didn't buy that tool only because I was able to make this tool work, although it's not the right tool specifically for this job, but it did do an adequate job of holding this basket basically. So while you remove this center bolt, this is the main bolt that holds that basket in place, okay, and you have to take that out. This basket, if you can't hold it from spinning, this will just keep spinning the whole basket around when you're trying to use something like a impact driver or a socket to remove it. So a couple other things I want to mention, that is that, so on this one, this is my friction disc and clutch pack. The clutch was actually in really good condition, but it was just past its service limit of 0.112 inches. So I decided to just go ahead and order a new clutch. So I ordered my stuff from a company called Fastech. They're a go-kart specific company, and but you can get this from other places too, like Rocky Mountain ATV and Moto Sport, which I really like them a lot for dirt bike parts. So this right here, this is something I like to do just as a tip to beginners. So this is a plunger rod that is used to affect the clutch pulley movement. I'm sorry, the clutch compression movement. And it goes through here, and it's a little bit convoluted process that we don't need to take the time to go through. But inside here is a ball bearing, and it's got a sleeve basically that goes over this rod, and I just didn't want to lose them. So I cleaned them both up really good, and then put some of this blue, tape that people use for painting and so forth. So that's the way I do it. I don't like to lose things, and it's so easy to do when you have a gazillion parts laying around to misplace one or not know the order of one. That's why I kind of reassembled this basket here, putting these clutch springs and everything kind of back in their original position so that I wouldn't lose them. I'm just, like I say, I'm paranoid about that, and I like to keep everything really orderly. So here's another thing I want to mention. If you want to do this job, get a service manual, okay? This is not the same thing as an owner's manual, which has a lot of other things regarding, brake service and fork service and all kinds of stuff, although this one has it as well. This one goes into a lot more detail in terms of the breakdown, schematics, exploded views, and so forth that you'll need to really get a good view of the various tedious components inside here. There's a lot of springs, bearings, sprockets, gears, input, output shafts. There's lots of stuff inside one of these motors. You don't want to get them mixed up. So anyway, get a service manual. And then I set up my shop toolbox basically as the place where I'm going to store my parts. I got a piece of, this is the type of paper that they use in cars for masking for painting, which I've done a lot of that type of work in my life, so I have some of that stuff laying around. But try to make a clean surface so you got a place to work. So you can see here I've got kind of a nice place to do the work, and if you're not doing it that way and organizing all of your parts in a fashion similar to this, you're going to lose something. So make sure to find a nice place to spread your parts out, and later when it gets a little bit more detailed in terms of the breakdown of this motor, I'm going to show you how I label all the parts as well. So as far as the clutch part, I'm not going to give you a big breakdown in terms of how to take the clutch out. It's pretty simple. If you can't take out a clutch, you probably should not take on rebuilding the rest of the motor. I say that, but I'm about to do the same thing, taking on this rebuild. So if you can't do the clutch, just maybe take it to a professional. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do after this is I'm going to take the motor off the cart, and we're going to start with disassembling the components necessary to split the cases. So we're on our way. Hey everyone, so I want to show you some really good websites and YouTube channels to look for doing this two-stroke build. So forgive me, I'm doing this by hand, holding this iPad in one hand and talking and looking at my computer like with my eye over the top of the iPad. So a little bit of a budget job, I have to admit, but the truth is I've never really made a YouTube video of any significance. So anyway, this guy Cameron Niamela, he has fantastic videos on YouTube, all kinds of stuff about two-strokes and rebuild stuff, really cool articles, and very knowledgeable guy, clearly. All kinds of things from teardown to polishing, you name it. This kid, he's really young, 20s, 24, something like that, really young, but he's pretty smart and he has really great videos. So another one for these for this rebuild that I like a lot is this guy Shane Connolly. So this guy teaches a course in mechanics or something like that at some school, and he knows obviously a lot about a lot of different things, and you can find some great videos. I watched several videos on his YouTube page regarding gearbox and transmission function, so you might want to check him out. And let's see, another one that I really like is Rocky Mountain ATV. So these people have really good videos on teardown, I thought in particular. So I think it's good to watch more than one video on any specific area that you're working on, just so you get like a better view or a better idea of the complications that you might deal with as you're starting to do your own teardown and rebuild. So I would definitely recommend cruising around looking at different ones. So Rocky Mountain ATV. Now I'm going to go on to a couple of websites. Now this one that I use a lot, Fast Tech, they are a karting specific company, but they have a lot of great stuff at good prices, like rebuild components in particular. So Hondas are popular with karters. In fact, they're exclusive in karting. You have to run a Honda motor, and they have all kinds of great deals on Honda parts. So if you like that as an option or whatever, you're working on a Honda, you can look at these guys at Fast Tech. So Motorsport, I've used them a lot for my dirt bikes, and they have really good prices and fast turnaround. They have pretty much everything you can imagine. It's like in stock, so they're really good about getting things to you quickly. I really like dealing with these people a lot. They've been really, really good to work with. This is a new one. I was talking about their YouTube page earlier about Rocky Mountain ATV. So a lot of people in the dirt bike world like these people. I have never bought anything from them. However, they sell a specific line of tools called Tusk, T-U-S-K, and the Tusk tools are the ones that you will need to do this rebuild. They have all kinds of stuff, case splitters, just several different things like bearing press tools and stuff like that. I'm going to give you a list of tools as this video goes on, but I'm going to buy virtually all of my tools from Rocky Mountain ATV, so that'll come up later as this video progresses. So I've got to order my tools for them. I just started the teardown process, trying to evaluate if I was actually going to have to rebuild this motor, and I'm still kind of at this stage where I haven't purchased my rebuild parts or the tools that I need, because I just came up with this idea for doing this video today. So here we go. So anyway, long story short, I'm getting everything for my tools at Rocky Mountain ATV, and Tusk is a very highly rated brand from looking at the internet. People really like them, and they're very inexpensive. So I'll go into that in a later part of the video. One other thing I'd like to add to what I was saying earlier about Rocky Mountain ATV is they have a really robust website with video and all kinds of stuff. But here's one thing I wanted to show you. So over here on the left, they have a function that allows for you to search for OEM parts. And this is really useful. Let me show you why. So you go to OEM Honda, and here you can pick your motorcycle, whatever. Sorry, I'm moving the iPad. So you pick, motorcycle and so on, and select your model and everything else. So I already kind of boosted ahead of that and searched out my specific gearbox. So you can see this gearbox schematic, basically. It's an exploded view, and this is extremely useful for working in your shop. So in this case, I took the gearbox picture, I right-clicked and said open image in new tab, which I've already done, and here's the gearbox picture right there. So what I did is I did Control P function on my Windows PC, and that allowed me to print it. So it comes up with Control P, and I think we're going to get a print function hopefully. Control P, there we go. And then what I did is I blew this up on mine up to 140%. See that? The scale 140. So a little bit larger, so it'd really fill up the screen. So I would recommend printing these things out before you're doing any of these reassembly jobs, and even the disassembly. I like to lay these like near the components that I'm working on, and like put the components next to the diagram so that I make sure I've got everything in order. I have seen some other videos, particularly regarding these cogs, where it's easy to install one of these cogs like number 4, number 10, number 14, number 7, number 12, and number 9, those types of cogs, and to install them reversed. So you really need to be able to see these schematics in detail. The service manual has these, but it's good to have another source. So I would recommend printing these out and saving them with all of the work that you're doing on this motor. So Rocky Mountain ATV, that's where you get those. Hey everyone, I'm going to be disassembling this motor and removing it from the chassis, and I'm just going to show you a little bit about that without going into a whole lot of detail regarding the specifics of each individual bolt and so on that's going to have to be removed, because you can probably figure this out. And again, this is something that's very easy to see in a service manual. I'm just going to show you some of the basic things. So the water line, you know, this is the one that goes into the cylinder head. This is going to have to be removed. On a dirt bike, it has another one on this side, but on this shifter cart, they plug these. It's pretty common for engine builders to plug those. Down below, a little bit lower, I'm going to be removing this hose right here, and then there's another hose right back here. You can see the compression clamp that's on there. First, I drain the water out right here. This is a water drain plug, basically. You have to remove the radiator cap in order to stop vacuum from being created in the cooling system. So once you take that radiator cap off, the water will really spew out really strongly. So keep that in mind. You know, I kept a little water tray near mine, but I did squirt a little water on my floor. It was kind of funny. So just remember that has a lot of force. That water comes out like a little water hose. It's kind of funny. So in addition to that, the carburetor is going to have to come off. And let me see if I can get in there. So you can see this little band right over here. So that is a compression clamp as well, a little hose clamp. This one has one on the air filter as well, and the regulatory agent, the body SCUSA, the one that I race under, has a regulation for this air box. On a dirt bike, it's going to be different. But you can take that band off. I'm probably not. I'm just going to remove this hose clamp that I showed you just a second ago right here. I'm just going to remove that one, if you can kind of see it. Trying to get a good shot there. But you know what it is. So this is just to remove the carburetor, okay? So I'm going to pull this carburetor off basically, and then I'm going to put it like in a plastic bag just to make sure that no dust and dirt or anything like that gets into the carburetor. And on shifter cart motors, there's a motor mount basically that has, it's right here. And so under here there's some brackets, and those clamps basically that are on there, they clamp on, you know, under the motor mount. This is a motor mount here. So I just take those out, and then of course you got to remove the chain. I personally like to remove the master link on that. I just think it's easier to take the chain off than to manipulate the chain around these gears. It's a lot of trouble, and taking that master link out is really easy. So mine has a CDI ignition here, CDI, and mine was originally mounted on a cover plate that went around the clutch pack, and I just removed that and set it to the side and taped the spacers and so on that went with it to the aluminum bracket that held it in place. So lastly, you can kind of see the chain on here. You know, this is the master link. I have found that sometimes master links will break loose, and I just started putting safety wire around the master link like that. I've never had it cause any trouble with the chain operation, and you never lose the master link that way. I've had a chain go flying off. That wasn't too pretty. One final thing, at least on a shifter cart, you can kind of see in there a little ways, just right in the middle of that picture, there is a nut on the end of a shaft. That's called a J-arm on a shifter cart, and you can see it a little bit better right there. That is the gear selecting mechanism. It connects to a rod that goes to a shifter arm that is up by the driver's steering wheel. So those are the things that are going to have to be removed in order to get this motor off. The throttle is also connected to the carburetor right here, and I'm just going to leave that in place because there's really no need to take it out. I'm just removing the carburetor and just kind of keeping all that stuff as one piece. So those are the main items that are going to have to come off to, oh, I forgot one other important thing, the exhaust. So this one has these exhaust springs. You can kind of see them in here. They can be kind of a bear to get off. If you haven't done it before, I would definitely recommend using a proper spring removal tool, because those suckers can go flying at you pretty hard if you use some other tool and it doesn't really grip tightly to the spring ends. So so that's basically the stuff that needs to come off. You can kind of see the overview of the engine. So I'll take that pipe off, and then after that we're going to go into breaking down the entire engine for reassembly. So we're moving on. So a couple things I want to tell you. Just a moment ago I was talking about all the things I was going to take apart. I erroneously told you that this hose right here was going to have to come off. It doesn't really have to come off right this minute. It's connecting basically the water pump area to the cylinder head, and you can take that off at another time, but I made it seem like that you had to take it off in order to get the motor off. That's not so. And then secondly, I was going to tell you that the clutch mechanism, which, to get this camera on there, you can see it. I put a little fuel line over there over the top of it, not only to protect it from abrasion, but to direct it to go a little bit straighter and keep kinks out of it and stuff. So I like to do things like that. But this thing, basically, you just pull it out. So you know, you just pull this out of the crank half or the crank side, and then just snap it out like that. And that's how you release the clutch before you do disassembly. So I'll finish pulling that out. You don't really need to have a whole video to watch me do that, but I just want to show you a couple of the things. I removed the carburetor, like I was mentioning. I did not put it in a plastic bag because I had it so intact. So I just stuck a piece of shop towel in there, a little piece of shop paper towel style, and that's just going to keep the dirt out of it while I'm doing the rebuild. So, all right, so we'll continue on. Alright, so I have the motor out, and I have been turning the music off for all these video segments, but I just decided to leave it on, so get a little Elton John in the background. So I'm really curious to see, after I get this cylinder head off, what's going on under there, because that was the only thing that I serviced on this motor before what I believe is a gearbox malfunction kicked in. So I just now loosened up these hose clamps, this one, and I'm going to take this hose off. Then I'm going to go back and take these nuts off. So starting with the head, you need to do these in a diagonal pattern. They are torqued in place, as you should know. So if you don't know the torque specs, look in that service manual I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to take these off, take these nuts off right here, and then remove the cylinder. I've already drained all the water out, as I mentioned earlier. So the motor is now on my bench and ready for teardown. All right, so I just removed the cylinder, and there is nothing wrong with it. I looked at it carefully, and I thought maybe the reason that the motor would not spin with a gear engaged was because that perhaps I had left something inside of here, like a rag or something. I'm pretty careful about those types of things, but there is nothing in here. Checked it really carefully. The piston is a new Wiseco, and actually I'm going to change that out at the recommendation of the engine builder. It's brand new. This thing has not even been run yet, as I mentioned, because of the gearbox problem that I had, but the crank will move. You know, you see that? It moves just fine. Well, I'm having a little trouble because it's at basically the equivalent of top dead center, but it will move up and down. There you go. I got it to go back now. So yeah, so it moves back and it moves forward. So there's nothing that is stopping the crank from spinning around, which I thought maybe some issue because, as I mentioned, I serviced this piston before the last race. All right, so that's one thing eliminated. Cylinder head off, and piston and the related crank action are all functioning correctly. All right, so next I'm taking off the manifold here where the reed cage sits. So there's 4 bolts for that. There's the second one, and there's 2 more that I've already removed on the other side. You can see the holes basically right there. And so I'm getting a little stand to hold this iPad while I do this work, so I'll be able to have a little bit more professional video as the days proceed. So sorry about the bumpy camera work right now, but I'm hoping that that will improve. I've never spent a lot of time doing these YouTube videos, so bear with me. The video will improve. All right, thanks. Moving on. Okay, so now I'm taking off this outer cover, and to be honest, I don't know the exact name, but I'm going to look it up, and you'll be able to find it probably in that service manual. So there's a number of bolts basically that you have to take out. I'm using this impact driver to take them out here. Whoops, sorry. Here, there's one under there. You get the idea. So I'm taking all those off, and my engine builder, who I'm not going to give you his name because I don't care for him too much, put his non-OEM Allen in there to replace the original OEM bolt. So I'm going to buy a new one of those. It's kind of a strange thing to do. Today I'm going to take off a number of things, but one of them is going to be this flywheel and stator assembly that you see. So this device has several fasteners. You can see some here, 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 and then these two, which I think this is called the stator. I have to double check that. Sorry, I don't know every single word because I don't do this all the time. But this is the flywheel basically. So you have to have a puller to, or a device to hold that. And I use this Motion Pro one. Where's the camera? There we go. So it's got these little cogs, I guess you could call them, on the end of this tool. Sorry, that's still a little new at this YouTubing business. So anyway, this device will fit into these holes. You know, you have to set the spreader to the right width to get it to go in there. But I have an unnatural and irrational anxiety about electronics. I'm always thinking that I'm going to reassemble this and the timing is going to be wrong, or I'm going to put the flywheel on the wrong position, something like that. So rest assured, I'm going to do a lot of research on making sure that I put this thing in correctly and I take it apart smartly. So I'm using the manual. I've got my service manual with me, and I'm using my manual to facilitate this disassembly and to make sure that I do it in the right order and that I save everything. So in this video, I'm going to do a little bit less on the disassembly side because I think there's a lot of information available regarding disassembly, but the assembly is the part that really makes me uncomfortable, and probably newbies as well. Stripping things down and tearing things up is usually not difficult for most people. Okay, so I've moved ahead just a little bit, and I had to do some work without video because I don't have a good way of holding this video camera / iPad at the same time as I make a video. So in the short run, like I talked about, until I get my little tripod device, I'm not going to be able to do it quite as the way I want. But so here's the thing. I took this Motion Pro device, stuck it in the flywheel, and held these two little pilot holes, I guess you might call them, for this device. So it's got these little prongs, whatever you want to call them, that go in these holes. You hold the flywheel with that, and from there you remove this nut. So that was on there, okay? So I took that nut off, and then after the nut came off, I took my flywheel puller. This is a Motion Pro flywheel puller. Inserted in here. Now this is an interesting thing. This is a reverse thread. So you reverse thread this into the flywheel, which was not as simple as it seems. There's I think the threads were a little dirty. So you put that in there and it's sliding, which makes things a little bit more difficult for me. But regardless, that thing screws into the flywheel. This boss screws into the flywheel. Reverse thread. Like that. And then I use just a large crescent on this. The diameter of this nut was the same as the it was the same size nut as the original nut that was on the flywheel. So it was the same, which was kind of convenient. So I held this with the wrench, tightened this with an impact driver, and hopefully everything turned out right because the flywheel seemed to come loose. Now this is something kind of neat that I didn't realize. Things you learn when you do something for the first time. This is magnetized, you know, so it's got like magnetic resistance when you're taking it off. It's kind of cool. I didn't know that that's the way those things, I didn't know they created magnetic force against you when you took them off. So just kind of some whiz-bang information there. So I'm going to continue by taking apart this plate basically that holds the stator and everything in place, and this electronic magneto-y type stuff in the center. So all that's going to come off next. So there, stay tuned. Okay, so I got out the this whole ignition plate basically, And one thing I thought was kind of significant is that there's only this bolt right here and this bolt right here that held it into the crank half or the case. So that was really nice because I'm like super paranoid about messing up the timing on one of these. And this one, this has like a special timing plate, that little blue anodized thing that you see right there below my finger. That is a restriction on timing that is mandated by SCUSA, the regulatory body for karting, and it keeps it so that engine developers cannot mess with this thing too much in terms of timing. They try to keep these motors virtually stock. When you read the rule book on how to prepare a 125, there's virtually nothing that's allowed except for, you know, blueprint on this, which is, you know, very basic. No porting, no nothing. They do remove the power valves from these. Not all motorcycles have power valves, I don't think, but on this one, a 1999 model, they had power valves on the cylinder head, and those they remove, I think this is in interest of removing some of the complexity of the motor, and those are plugged in and the kickstarter is removed. So on the other side, when I start tearing apart the gear case, the gearbox, you'll note that there is no kickstart mechanism, and I've been doing some research on YouTube regarding those kickstarts, and they are a little bit hairy, so pay attention to those. I'll show you a video from Rocky Mountain ATV. They have a really good video showing how to be careful when removing the kickstart mechanism. So basically now I have the ignition undone, which I was really super paranoid about, and I'm going to bag those. So I wanted to go over that real quick. Bagging and detailing everything that you do is crucial. Do not trust yourself for a second that you're not going to lose something, okay? Because you will. Bag things, label things immediately after you take them off, or you'll forget. I promise you, you're going to have some nut and you go, oh yeah, I remember that goes. You will not remember, okay? If you haven't been doing this for a long time, you will not remember. So what I do is I bag these things and tape them. So you remember from an earlier video, I taped up that plunger rod that activates the clutch. I tape up all these screws and so on that go to the various things. That's one that holds ignition in place. I put tape on them, and then I put them in bags. So like right here, I've got this bag that says the Honda cover, which is just the cover plate on the side that says Honda on it. So that's, I just label it Honda. But I've got one for the water pump and all kinds of stuff, and I'm getting ready to make one for the ignition. So do not trust yourself, okay, to remember these things. You won't label everything when you take it off and put it away immediately, or you're gonna forget something. All right, so I'm gonna take out this little, I think this thing, it's a clutch actuator device, okay? So I'm taking that out, and this little spring, that's the thing I'm trying to pay attention to. I don't wanna mess that up. So I'm not sure what I'm getting into here, so you're learning with me. Looks like that's no big deal. Got it out. Okay, so I saw this on another motor. I think it was a Yamaha, and there was actually a little Allen that held this this little machine surface in place. So I just want to make sure that it didn't have the same thing on this. Okay, so now I'm going to take off this shaft right here, and this is the bolt that goes through it. And I saw a couple little techniques to affect this, but you need to reinstall this clutch basket, the outer basket, just loosely, and slide it back onto the to the spline here, whatever. And so people that I saw that did some kind of cool things on the internet stuck this washer in there. If I can get it with one hand, it's kind of hard to do that. I really like it the other way. Hold on, sorry, camera. So, sorry, get that sucker in there. And then, sorry, it's super hard to do this with one hand. So that's kind of the technique. I really like it with one tooth down. But basically this locks the basket to this drive sprocket here, or the sprocket, so you can affect the release of this bolt. So I've already done this basically, and I put an impact driver on that, and that's the way I did it. It doesn't take a lot of force, which is good, because I was really worried about damaging these teeth after seeing this done on the internet. But it's not that big of a deal. The bolt is not crazy tight, and this shouldn't cause you any trouble at all, and don't feel nervous about using that washer technique, okay? There's not a lot of impact that's transmitted into those teeth using this procedure. Okay, so now I'm going to start working on this part. So this is the shaft that goes to the other side of the gearbox, where the shifter like the foot shifter on a dirt bike would go, and on a go-kart it is the J-arm, basically the spline side of this. So I don't know why, but all this stuff looks really complicated and freaky to me for some reason. Like I'm nervous that I'm gonna put it back together in like the wrong order or something, you know. I mean, that's kind of where I come from in a general sense on doing these types of jobs, you know. That's just like one little spring not put together in the right position, or, you know, a nut put on in reverse, stuff like that kind of freaks me out. So I'm going to take this apart extremely carefully. Now I've already loosened these bolts here because I wanted to make the video go a little faster. So I loosened them. There's one. A little prayer perhaps. Whoa, don't freak out. Alright, so far so good. Alright, I see a washer there. You see that? Don't lose that. Okay, so that goes on top of that. So I'm going to tape that so that I know the order that it goes in. Alright, so here we go. I'm going to do something crazy. I think this part comes out fairly straightforwardly. I was reading that inside here are these things called pawls, P-A-W-L-S, so pawls. And those need to come out as an assembly because they're spring-loaded and stuff can go flying. So I think I'm going to have to put the camera down for this one because I need two hands. Okay, so I'm pleased to say that everything came out together. So these are the pawls, these little pieces right here. Let me see if I can point to them. So that is a pawl and that is a pawl. Inside here is a spring-loaded thing. I think the springs are supposed to be replaced when you rebuild the motor. I took out that shifter shaft. All looks cool. Now there's some kind of special procedure that you got to do to take the rest of this stuff off. So I'm going to consult my manual. Right here next to me. I'm using this thing like crazy, trying to keep it clean. So anyway, the next thing I'm going to work on is this component here, and then taking this out. And then once I'm there, I've only really got to take the motor mount off, and then I can split the cases. I'm probably not going to take that piston off just yet because I've got a new crank coming for this thing anyway. So yeah, so we're getting really, really close. Okay, so this piece came out really drama-free. No big deal. That's what it looks like. So I keep it in order, like I mentioned. I'm keeping the screw piece in the center of this drum piece, the shift drum center. Now I'm working on this stopper arm. Okay. So, and again, I did like I did last time. I loosened it a little bit just to don't want to lose the washer. So that is that's basically the end of this side. Okay, this is going to be a really quick one. So basically, I'm at the point now where I'm going to be taking the case completely apart. So this bolt, these bolts, they're coming out. This, some ones down here. It's going to be pretty obvious, I think, as to which bolts need to come out. But you can always consult the manual, if it's a question. So I've taken out this shifter, whatever thing is, the spring-loaded thing. Took that out. So after I take these screws out of the cases, I'm going to take off the motor mount, which has been nice to have on there to stabilize the motor while I'm working on it. So, okay, man, it's about to go down. I'm kind of freaked out, I gotta be honest. So say a little prayer for me that this case splitting works out okay. Alrighty, the motor mount is off. Took it off. I don't even see that. This is the front motor mount. Took that off. Took all the screws that I showed you earlier. They're all out. So it's case splitting time.